Now, Western Cape Premier Alan Winde is outraged by the Treasury's decision to grant Eskom exemption from revealing its irregular and wasteful expenditure. Winde says they're considering options to stop this, and he joins me now live via Zoom. Thank you very much, Mr. Winde, for your time here on ENCA. Let's start with what you're suspecting. What do you suspect is happening? Eskom is a thorn in our side as South Africans, isn't it?
Well, I cannot believe that, when I saw that gazette, I cannot believe that Treasury even contemplates supporting something like this. We're in such deep trouble with our energy supply in South Africa. I think it's the worst thing in the world to say, well, now, quite frankly, you can actually get away with, whatever else you want to do incorrectly. We've got to make sure that we actually have good governance. That's the foundation of any organization to be able to offer services to their clients. And if ever there was a time where Eskom needs to be tightened up around governance, it should be now. So it's relaxation of saying, well, in your books, you don't have to disclose wasteful expenditure or, illegal, fruitless expenditure cannot be how we are moving forward in a country where we can't keep the lights on. And, Treasury itself, they're supposed to be guarding that. That's the last bastion of holding all of this governance together to deal with mechanisms around making sure we understand that corruption is something that is destroying our country and destroying service delivery. And there's no better place than to see it happening. And we feel it, every one of us, every single day with load shedding. So it is just totally unacceptable. We've got to have a look. We've already spoken to our legal team. What is it that we can do legally about this? Quite frankly, South Africa needs to stand up and say this is just not on.
Before I ask you what your legal team has advised you, Mr. Winde, is it strange that this also coincides with a few weeks ago, February that is, the announcement during the State of the Nation address, the President saying officially we are under a national state of disaster. Is it a coincidence that it coincides with that?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a misinterpretation of what a disaster declaration means of getting, quick reaction to sorting out our problem of getting the lights back on. My gut says to me, this is just a mechanism that Parliament doesn't have now oversight over expenditure. And I'm really worried. Is this a cover-up so that we can protect corruption between now and the election? That cannot be. We've got to fix our problem right now. And the problem is when you have an issue like this, transparency is the best mechanism of dealing with these problems, of making sure you understand the absolute risks that we face. And quite frankly, if the money is going to the wrong place, that has to be fixed immediately. And we're now saying you don't have to report on any money that's going incorrectly. That just is unacceptable. And that also worries me. How do we deal with grey listing when the world is saying to us, we are worried about how you financially manage the country, and then we come out with our Treasury giving exemption to one of our state-owned enterprises that is really holding back the economy and really keeping every one of us to ransom? And is this now going to open a floodgate of other SOEs saying, well, we want the same protection. We can just carry on looting and doing what we want to do, and Treasury will give us that cover. It cannot be.
It totally goes against the PFMA, doesn't it, Mr. Winde? But also, it's very interesting financial years, isn't it? Especially that 2022, 23, 2023, 24. This is during the time, at least in the last half of 2021 and most of last year and most of this year so far, we've seen we've been load shed every single day, and we found out that they've been buying thousands of liters of diesel to be able to keep afloat. So isn't it interesting how it's these particular financial years that they're being exempt from? Maybe they don't want us to see something?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's all these questions about where is our coal going? It seems to be crossing the border and not going to our power stations. Who's getting the contracts for the diesel, as you say? Billions of rands worth of diesel. What is being done and how is it being done? And the only way you deal with that is through transparency. When you want to hide it, who are you protecting? So, of course, that asks the question. And that's why I'm stunned that it's actually Treasury that's giving a loophole to a state-owned enterprise in a time when, quite frankly, we need to be cleaning it up. And now you spoke about the PFMA. That's exactly the document that gives us that transparency and gives us that framework of how we should be making sure that our governance is being held accountable and is being put in place in the best way that it can. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if ever you let slip on governance, you cannot expect the rest of the machine to work. So here you're giving the foundation of an operational and performing entity or government or whatever space it is. Governance is the first thing you've got to get right. And now you're giving that specific space, that foundation, the opportunity to carry on, without having any oversight. So it really, really does worry me.
It's sort of as if we are continuously being punched in the gut, at least as South Africans and business, etc. This is the exact month when Eskom's tariffs go up. We're still under a high level of load shedding, and now we find this out that we won't be able to actually see exactly where the public funds are going. But what has your legal team advised you? You said you spoke to them. Have they advised you yet?
So yesterday we asked our Treasury to have a look at the details, and today engaged with our legal team. I haven't got a report back on exactly what is within our powers or how we can challenge this, but we will look at every single opportunity or option on how we can challenge this. You speak about the load shedding levels now, the projections of load shedding through this winter time, is going to get worse, not better. So quite frankly, and for the next 18 months, it's going to get worse. And if we don't allow the system to be fixed, well, then how many years more are we going to be stuck with load shedding? And at what stage does our economy just go into total collapse? So really, it is unacceptable. So we will look at every single option available to us to challenge this.
Mr. Winde, thank you very much for your time. I just want to keep you for one more question. You mentioned grey listing a little earlier on. This, of course, that committee that ended up deciding that we would be grey listed along with Nigeria, two big economies in the African continent, by the way, being grey listed at the same time. This was to make this was because it said that our government was not able to make sure that there's no corruption and that we are not, a country that is susceptible to it. So do you think that a move such as this one will, prohibit us from being able to be like a Mauritius, which was able to get off grey listing within 19 months?
Absolutely. So if you look at the grey listing and what is an issue, I mean, we've just had a really lengthy, in-depth process, looking at corruption in our country. And, that is the first stage of saying, how are you dealing with it? But what are the consequences of such a substantial report into corruption? Are people being held accountable? Are we seeing people going through our court processes and being put in jail? Are we seeing the sort of opening up of the sort of, it seems, entrenched endemic corruption in our country? Well, the answer is no. And that's really, I suppose, what really pushed us into this grey listing environment. Now, one would expect to see further transparency and further action with a real determination to say we want to move out of grey listing. And this what's happened now, this gazette is exactly the opposite of what any international funder or any organization looking at whether we should get out of grey listing or not. And as you've said, it's a process and it takes time. But quite frankly, this just puts us further back and is going to take longer now for us as a country to get into that space. And the way I understand it is this gazette is supposedly to make it easier for the entity to borrow more money. Well, quite frankly, I mean, I don't think lenders are stupid.
Yeah.
I think all that's happen now is that any borrowing is just going to get much more expensive if that borrowing is enabled at all. So quite frankly, I do not understand this. I think it is taking us a huge step backwards and not a step forward.
I think we're going to try and spend the next few days trying to understand exactly what prompted National Treasury to take such a decision. Thank you so much for your time. The Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, speaking to us there after the breaking news that the National Treasury has gazetted that Eskom will be exempted from showing us its books from about 4 financial years.